A lie in a relationship rarely announces itself. It doesn't arrive with a confession. It usually appears as something much smaller. A question answered with another question. A story missing important details. A phone that suddenly feels like a locked safe. Individually, these moments seem harmless. But when they start repeating, they form a pattern that many men ignore until the damage is already done. The problem isn't that the signs are invisible. The problem is that most men don't know how to read them. And when you don't understand the pattern, it's easy to doubt your own instincts instead of trusting them. In this video, we're going to break down 6 lies women often tell in relationships and how recognizing them can protect you from being quietly manipulated. Number 1. Answering a question with another question. This is one of the oldest and most reliable ways people avoid telling the truth. And once you learn to recognize it, you will start noticing it everywhere. Imagine this situation. You ask a very simple question. Where were you last night? It is not aggressive. It is not accusatory. It is just a straightforward question that should have a straightforward answer. But instead of answering you directly, she responds with something like, "Why are you asking me that?" Or worse, "Why are you always questioning me?" Suddenly, the conversation is no longer about where she was. Now the conversation is about your tone, your suspicion, your attitude. And that shift is not accidental. Psychologically, this is what is known as deflection. When someone feels pressure from a question they cannot comfortably answer, they redirect the pressure back toward the person asking it. Instead of providing information, they create confusion. Instead of addressing the question, they challenge the motivation behind the question. Why does this work so often? Because most men take the bait. The moment she asks, "Why are you asking?" many men start explaining themselves. They begin defending their curiosity. They try to reassure her that they are not accusing her of anything. And just like that, the original question disappears from the center of the conversation. But here is the important insight. When someone answers a question with another question, they are not actually participating in the conversation. They are buying time. Human brains need a few seconds to construct a believable story. When a question comes unexpectedly, those few seconds are extremely valuable. A counter question can create exactly that window. And while you are busy explaining yourself, the other person is quietly building the answer they will eventually give you. This is why the smartest response is not emotional, and it is not confrontational. It is calm. It is steady. And it simply brings the conversation back to the original point. Instead of arguing about why you asked, you gently reset the frame. "I'm not accusing you of anything. I'm just asking where you were." Notice what this does. It removes the distraction and places the question back where it belongs. Men often lose control of conversations because they allow the topic to be changed. But the person who controls the conversation is usually the person who keeps the focus exactly where it started. And when the focus stays on the original question, deflection becomes much harder to hide behind. Number 2. Vague answers. Another common pattern appears when someone answers your question, but gives you almost no information. It sounds like a response, but when you look closer, it actually tells you very little. For example, you ask, "Who did you go out with?" And the answer you get is, "A friend." That's it. No name, no context, no details that allow you to understand what actually happened. At first glance, this may not seem like a lie. After all, she technically answered the question. But what she gave you was not clarity. What she gave you was distance. This pattern is often called information control. When people are being truthful, they naturally provide details. The brain retrieves memories as scenes. Who was there? Where it happened? What time it was? What was said? But when someone is hiding something, details become dangerous. Because every detail can be checked. A name can be verified. A location can be questioned. A timeline can be compared against other facts. So instead of offering specifics, the safest strategy is to stay vague. A friend. Some people. We just hung out. Nothing special. Notice how each of these responses creates a fog around the situation. You hear words, but you still cannot see the full picture. Research in deception psychology has repeatedly found that people who are fabricating stories tend to provide fewer concrete details than people who are telling the truth. It is not because they want to sound mysterious. It is because details increase the risk of contradiction, and contradictions are where lies start to collapse. This is why vague answers often feel uncomfortable, even when you cannot immediately explain why. Your intuition senses that information is being withheld. But again, many men respond to this moment in the wrong way. They either ignore the discomfort, or they immediately jump into accusations. Both reactions make things worse. The smarter approach is much simpler. Ask for clarity, not aggressively, not emotionally, just specifically. A friend? Which friend? Where did you go? What time did you leave? These questions do something very powerful. They force the conversation to move from fog to detail. And detail is the natural enemy of deception. A person telling the truth can usually walk through details without hesitation. But a person trying to maintain a constructed story often struggles the moment the conversation becomes precise. Because vague answers survive in ambiguity, but they rarely survive in the light of specifics. Number 3, delayed responses. In the past, people had to lie face to face. Today, relationships unfold through screens, text messages, read receipts, typing bubbles that appear and disappear. And in this environment, a new pattern has become surprisingly common: the delayed response. Picture the situation. You send a simple message. Where are you right now? Nothing aggressive. Just a normal question. You see the message is delivered. A few moments later, it shows as read. And then, silence. 10 minutes pass. 20 minutes. 30. An hour later, a reply finally appears. Sorry, I was busy. Maybe that explanation is true. People do get busy. People miss messages. But what matters is the pattern. Because sometimes that silence is not about being occupied. Sometimes that silence is about building a story. When someone receives a question they are not prepared to answer honestly, the first instinct is often to buy time. Time to think. Time to align details. Time to decide what version of events sounds believable. A few extra minutes can make a huge difference when someone is constructing a narrative. They might replay what happened. They might check earlier messages. They might even speak with someone else to make sure their stories match. And while all of that is happening, you are sitting on the other side of the conversation, wondering why a simple question suddenly requires so much time. This is one of the strange realities of modern relationships. Technology has made communication instant, but it has also made deception easier to manage. Messages can be deleted. Timelines can be adjusted. Stories can be edited before they are ever spoken. But there is an important distinction here. A single delayed response does not mean someone is lying. Life is unpredictable. Phones get left on tables. Meetings run long. Batteries die. What reveals the truth is repetition. If a person consistently takes a long time to answer very simple questions, especially questions about where they are, who they are with, or what they are doing, that pattern deserves attention. Because patterns rarely happen by accident. And the worst mistake a man can make in that moment is panic. Sending 10 messages in a row, demanding explanations, letting anxiety take control of the situation. The stronger move is the opposite. Stay calm, pay attention, and watch for the pattern. Because once a pattern reveals itself, the story behind it often becomes much easier to understand. Number 4. Body language that doesn't match the words. One of the most overlooked signals in any conversation is the body. People spend so much energy focusing on what is being said that they forget something important. The human body often reacts to stress before the mind finishes constructing a lie. And lying, for most people, creates stress. When someone tells the truth, their brain simply retrieves a memory. The event already exists. They are just describing it. But when someone lies, the brain has to do something far more complicated. It has to invent information, keep the invented story consistent, and at the same time, monitor the other person's reactions. That mental juggling act creates pressure, and the body often shows it. You might notice that she suddenly avoids eye contact when answering a specific question. Not casually looking away, but deliberately avoiding your gaze. You might notice excessive blinking, as if her body is trying to break the moment of connection. Sometimes her posture changes. Arms cross tightly over the chest. Hands slide into pockets. Shoulders shift in ways that look defensive rather than relaxed. These are small things. Easy to dismiss if you look at them individually. But together, they can reveal something deeper. Researchers who study nonverbal communication have long observed that deception often increases physiological tension. The body becomes slightly less natural. Movements become less fluid. Small defensive gestures appear without conscious intention. Now, here is an important caution. Body language is not a lie detector. People look away for many reasons. Some people cross their arms simply because they are comfortable that way. Nervousness can appear even when someone is telling the truth. This is why interpreting a single gesture in isolation is rarely reliable. The real signal appears when multiple elements stop aligning. Her words say one thing. Her body says something else. And the story itself does not quite fit the moment. When those layers begin to conflict, your intuition starts to feel that something is off. Most men ignore that feeling. They convince themselves they are overthinking the situation. They try to stay rational by focusing only on the words being spoken. But words are only one part of communication. The more observant approach is simple. Watch for consistency. Do the words match the tone? Does the tone match the body? Does the body match the story? When everything lines up, conversations feel natural. But when the body begins to argue with the story, the truth is often closer than it appears. Number 5. The story keeps changing. This is where many lies begin to fall apart. At first, the explanation sounds simple, clear, even convincing. You ask about something that happened the night before, and she tells you, "I went out to dinner with a friend." Nothing dramatic, nothing suspicious. But a day or two later, the story shifts slightly. Now you hear, "Well, actually, we had a drink before dinner." A few days after that, another detail appears. "Oh, and a couple of other people joined us later." Each version sounds small on its own. None of the changes seem dramatic enough to start an argument. But when you step back and look at the whole timeline, something becomes obvious. The story is evolving. This happens because lies are difficult to maintain over time. When someone tells the truth, they do not need to remember every word they said previously. The event already happened, and memory simply retrieves the same experience again. But when someone creates a story, the brain has to remember the story itself. Every detail, every version, every statement that was previously shared. Psychologists often refer to this as cognitive load. Maintaining a fabricated narrative requires constant mental effort. The brain has to track the lie, protect it from contradiction, and adjust it when new questions appear. That mental pressure eventually creates cracks. Details slip. Timelines change. New pieces appear that were never mentioned before. And the person telling the story may not even realize the inconsistencies they are creating. This is why the most revealing moments rarely happen during the first conversation. They happen later. When the same topic comes up again. When the same question is asked in a slightly different way. And suddenly the answer sounds different. A man who immediately explodes with accusations usually shuts down the opportunity to see these patterns clearly. Arguments force people into defensive positions, and once someone feels attacked, the conversation stops revealing useful information. The more effective approach is surprisingly calm. Listen carefully. Allow the story to unfold, and later revisit the same subject naturally. So remind me again, who else was there that night? If the story stays consistent, the situation may be exactly what it seemed. But if the details keep shifting, that inconsistency often speaks louder than any direct confrontation ever could. Because the truth rarely needs revisions, but a lie almost always does. Number 6. Extreme secrecy around the phone. In modern relationships, the phone has become something more than a device. It is a diary, a communication hub, and sometimes a vault that holds the most private parts of someone's life. Text messages, social media conversations, direct messages, call histories, photos, deleted threads that once existed. All of it lives inside a small object that most people keep within arm's reach almost every hour of the day. Because of this, behavior around the phone can sometimes reveal more than words ever will. You may start noticing small habits. She always keeps the phone face down on the table. If a notification appears, the screen is turned away quickly. She carries the phone everywhere, even into the next room for something that would normally take only a few seconds. If you casually reach for the phone to check something or make a quick call, the reaction is immediate, protective, almost reflexive. Again, this alone does not automatically mean someone is lying. Everyone deserves privacy. Healthy relationships still allow personal space, and not every locked phone hides something suspicious. But there is a difference between normal privacy and intense defensiveness. Normal privacy is calm. Extreme secrecy is tense. The difference becomes clearer when this behavior appears alongside the other patterns we have talked about. Vague answers, delayed responses, stories that shift over time. When those signals combine with unusually protective behavior around the phone, the situation begins to form a clearer picture. Because the phone is where modern conversations happen. If someone is hiding communication, that device becomes the one place they cannot allow anyone else to explore. That is why people who have something to conceal often develop habits around their phones without even realizing it. The stronger response for a man in that situation is not control. It is observation. Demanding access to someone's phone usually creates conflict without creating clarity. Arguments escalate. Defenses go up. Trust collapses even faster. But transparency in a healthy relationship tends to appear naturally. Two people who have nothing to hide usually move through daily life without constant tension around their devices. And when a phone begins to feel like a guarded safe rather than a normal object, it is often a signal worth paying attention to. So what should you actually do when you start noticing these patterns? Recognizing deception is one thing. Handling it the right way is something else entirely. The first step is understanding why the lie exists in the first place. Not every lie comes from the same place. Some people lie because they are afraid of conflict. Some lie to hide mistakes. And sometimes a lie appears because someone is trying to control the emotional balance of the relationship. Understanding the motive does not excuse the behavior, but it helps you see the situation clearly instead of reacting purely from emotion. The second step is trusting your instincts. Many men sense when something feels wrong long before they can explain it logically. But instead of listening to that instinct, they convince themselves they are imagining things. They tell themselves they are overthinking. Often, that instinct is simply your mind noticing inconsistencies your conscious brain has not fully processed yet. The third step is challenging the story with calm logic. This does not mean shouting. It does not mean accusing someone without evidence. It means asking clear questions and expecting clear answers. Conversations grounded in facts leave much less room for confusion. And finally, there needs to be honesty. Not every lie destroys a relationship. People make mistakes. People panic. People sometimes choose the wrong response in a difficult moment. But healthy relationships cannot survive without transparency. If honesty disappears, trust slowly disappears with it. And once trust is gone, the foundation of the relationship begins to crack in ways that are very difficult to repair. Lies in relationships rarely begin with something dramatic. They usually start small. A question that gets redirected instead of answered. A detail that disappears from a story. A message that takes strangely long to come back. A version of events that sounds slightly different the next time you hear it. Individually, these moments may not seem like much. Most people dismiss them. They tell themselves it is nothing. They convince themselves they are overthinking. But over time, small inconsistencies can quietly erode something far more important than the moment itself. Trust. And once trust begins to weaken, the entire emotional structure of a relationship becomes unstable. Now here is the important part. The goal is not to become suspicious of everything. Living in constant suspicion will destroy a relationship just as quickly as dishonesty will. The real goal is awareness. When you understand the patterns we talked about today, you do not need to investigate, control, or interrogate. You simply observe. You pay attention to whether words, behavior, and stories remain consistent over time. Because people who are telling the truth usually do not struggle to stay consistent. But when someone is hiding something, that consistency eventually becomes difficult to maintain. And the man who understands these patterns is far less likely to be manipulated by them. If this conversation helped you see relationship dynamics in a clearer way, make sure you subscribe to the channel so you do not miss future discussions like this. And if you have ever experienced one of these situations yourself, share your perspective in the comments. Sometimes hearing someone else's story is exactly what another person needs to finally recognize the truth they have been trying to ignore.